What is up, guys? In today's video, I'm going to be going over several quick tips to hopefully help you win more fights and use Porta bunkers best in Fortnite Zero Build. As always, if you guys do find this video to be helpful, informative, or interesting, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you like to see more, comment down below if you prefer to carry Porta bunkers or shield bubbles, and if you guys would like to use my code in the shop when getting anything, it is EvolveJake, just like my channel name is, and it is underneath the webcam at all times. So, with the South Park update especially, there's less mobility in the game, and I feel like this gives bunkers an even greater role. But also, with the Stick of Truth being a very prevalently spawned item, I feel like that's another thing that's going to make bunkers a really big deal. And the main reason why I prefer to carry bunkers over bubbles is that they are a more like permanent piece of cover, which is going to help in longer fights, and I feel like it's going to help most in in-game fights. Shield bubbles can be very helpful, especially if you're good at bubble fighting, but it creates a more like temporary barrier, which can oftentimes just be waited out, especially when we get into those like Stick of Truth or in-game situations. You might not have enough bubbles to like really make it work out. So I prefer to carry bunkers. And the first thing we're going to talk about is going to be pushing enemies in bunkers, because not only are you probably carrying them more with this update, so are the enemies. A lot of times in solos or duos, if I get good damage on somebody and then they bunker up, I want to push that person pretty much immediately and take advantage of the fact that I got them weak before they're able to regain health, and like really utilize the fact that they have that bunker. When they first put it down after you get damage on them, they're probably going to be healing. And so if you push aggressively with something like crash pads, this is going to be like your ample time to get that person out of the game before their bunker really gets going. Especially when it comes to endgame, if someone like kind of gets ahead of zone and bunkers up, you're probably going to need to push them. And if you have any damage to make that a bit easier, you're going to want to capitalize on that. In squads, it can be harder to just push a team that's in a bunker because there's potentially 4 people there. In solos, you know, it's a 1v1. You can quickly push that kill, get that person out of the game, and then now you have their bunker and don't have to waste bunkers of your own to have cover. In duos, kind of same thing. If you have one person weak, you can quickly get that person out of the game, and then it becomes a 2v1, and it's easier to play off. Squads, it's a lot harder to push enemies that are in bunkers, but what you can do is actually spray them out much faster if you all shoot as a team. In solos, spraying out an enemy bunker doesn't really work that well because it takes so long for just one AR or one pistol, whatever, to do enough damage to break the wall. But in squads, you can very quickly just evaporate enemy bunkers if you spray it out as a team. So don't be afraid to like call that, and then hopefully you guys can spray it out from somewhat protected angles and put pressure on the enemies, especially if you already have somebody weak. This might be a time where you want to like go for that spray play. Like maybe someone peeks, you get damage on them, they back up a little bit, take cover. Now your team just fully sprays it out and you can quickly get that knock. So how you're going to push them, I think, is very different depending on the game mode. One thing you can do, and that I really like to do when pushing enemy bunkers, is to throw a bunker of my own at the enemy bunker. Not only will this give you some cover as you push, but if you make it to where your bunker is literally connected to theirs, you will break the tires from their bunker, but your tires from your bunker will still be present. And if they walk too far forward in their bunker to the point where they get affected by those tires, they will get knocked back, and this can throw a lot of people off and give you that advantage when pushing. It can knock them out of the bunker completely, which can be a problem, especially if you're on some sort of high ground, or just make them knocked back. You still have your bunker to play off. You still have your cover to play off. It's just a huge advantage. It throws the enemy off. It makes them more exposed, removes their cover. It checks so many boxes. So throwing your bunker at an enemy bunker and making sure it actually connects to it will give you an easy opportunity to push and potentially throw that enemy off, like I said. So that's something that you're going to want to be doing if you're pushing an enemy bunker, especially if you have to push it without getting very much damage on them. Like there will be times where like zone just forces you or whatever. You might have to make a bad push, and throwing your bunker on theirs is something that will really help out in those situations. Mantling up an enemy's bunker is also something that you're probably going to want to do from time to time. And this can be a bit of a struggle for some people to do because the tires all around the bunker will actually knock you back and prevent you from mantling. But what you want to do is actually jump and mantle at the little corner piece. There's like a piece of metal that's above the bunker and above the tires. If you mantle onto that, you'll actually be able to mantle up and climb in just fine. And then, you know, get damage on the enemy, do whatever you got to do. But if you're ever in a situation where you need to mantle, knowing how to actually mantle the bunker is something that will help you a lot in those situations where you're pushing an enemy bunker. So Now I'm going to talk a little bit about how you might want to use bunkers. The first is going to be stacking. I'm sure many of you have seen enemy players stacking bunkers on top of each other, and you might be confused how this is happening. There's actually 2 ways that I know of to stack bunkers. There might be more, but you really only need to know how to do one of them. The first is going to be throwing it at that corner piece that we talked about before. If you throw it at that, your bunker will stack and build on top of the one that you're already in, and it'll be like a ramp rush type situation. You'll get a little bit forward and you'll get higher. Another way to stack bunkers is to look at the kind of middle metal bar while you're walked decently forward, and if you throw it down at that point, you will stack the bunker on top of the one you're currently in. This doesn't advance you forward, but it does just raise you one higher. So depending on the type of situation you're in and what you want the bunker to do, may change how you actually want to stack them. But like I said, most of the time you really only need to know how to do one of these different like bunker stacking abilities. Either way, you know, if you stacked it on top of each other, you get height off it. And this could be really helpful in situations where like you're bunkered up, an enemy team is bunkered up, and then you're in like kind of that stalemate situation. If you stack the bunker, that can give you the opportunity to get shots on the enemy because you now have high ground on them, and make it easier for you to like push that out or just win the fight completely. So those are kind of the main times that I would be stacking bunkers, or if you just want to make any sort of more like fortifiable position. Another thing that I like doing, depending on the situation that you don't see very frequently, is using them to break buildings or bushes or cover in some way. So I'll have a clip on screen now where I knew this person was in a house, but he was playing right shoulder peek in the building, and if I push into him, I'm probably going to take a lot of damage. So I throw a bunker down and it covers the wall completely that he was trying to peek. And then now I can push through the door on the bunker and have like a more neutral fight. But a lot of times what people will do is back up, or you can open the door on them and then, you know, slide through. Being able to play off the bunker this way is something that is really helpful. Another time that it can be helpful is for getting out of bad situations if you're in a building, because we don't have a mobility item that does this anymore. With shockwaves, you could just shockwave out of the building and you're fine. Shockwaves are gone. So just bunkering through a building might be a way for you to escape a bad situation inside a building. And the same is going to be true with bushes. If you're having like an awkward fight around a bush that you don't want to be partaking in, you could just throw the bunker down and that will destroy the bush in most cases and give you a more, I guess, less random fight, more structured fight in a situation that will probably throw the enemy off because they were thinking that they were camping in a bush, and now they're captured inside a Porta bunker. So not only is it good for removing the bush, but it kind of confuses the enemy and can potentially throw them off. And then the same is true with like the situation I talked about around buildings. One thing that's a struggle a lot of times is when you throw a bunker and you end up underneath it. That can really be problematic in a lot of situations. And from what I've found, it seems like if you jump and throw the bunker, it's much more likely that that actually happens. I'm not sure if it will just never happen if you're standing on the ground, but I seem to have that happen a lot less if I'm on the ground standing when I throw it rather than jumping. So just keep that in mind. It is like kind of weird to do because you start getting shot and your first instinct is to like kind of jump, turn, and throw the bunker, but you might just want to stay on the ground. That way you don't accidentally end up underneath it. One thing you can actually do that's nice is if you're trying to push an enemy, you might not have a crash pads, or it might be a situation where you don't want to use a crash pad. You can kind of throw a bunker in between you and the enemy, and this will protect you as you push up to them. And then you could maybe even use the tires to give you some sort of little boost of movement as you push them. But either way, even if you're not directly pushing an enemy this way, if you're bunkered up and, you know, you get shots on somebody and you want to push, utilizing those tires to get that little bit of forward momentum can be really helpful to just get there a little bit faster without using as much stamina. And if you do kind of do this boost and then land in a slide, you'll carry that momentum a little bit more forward. Another thing that is weird when it happens but isn't super prevalent is at the backside, there's like metal bars that have little slots in them. You can get shot and you can get sniped through those metal slots. It's very uncommon, but it is something to kind of keep in mind that it is like a false sense of security when you're standing all the way back in the bunker, because you can be shot from the side shooting through those slots. Like I said, it's very niche. It's probably never going to happen to you ever, but it is something that's maybe worth knowing. I see a lot of people, they throw a bunker down and then they feel like required to play the top part of it. They feel like they have to walk forward and then peek the top. And that could give you a good angle sometimes, but also playing the backside and peeking from the right, or kind of opening the door and peeking that way. You want to utilize right shoulder peeks around the bunker as often as you can, and a lot of times be throwing different peeks at the opponents to make yourself more unpredictable. Maybe you peek from the top, then you peek from the side. You condition them to not really be sure where you're peeking from and make their life a little bit harder. And then in team game modes as well, like, you don't all want to be peeking the top because that's more predictable. If you're peeking the backside, that's really helpful. And in close range fights around these bunkers, you want to be constantly like repositioning into right shoulder peeks, not feeling, I feel like I push a lot of people and they feel like they still just stand at the top part of the bunker. I'm not really sure why that is. If you get in the little bottom part, that can be a really good right shoulder peek for somebody pushing you. If you go through the door and then try to have them chase you, that can be another situation where you get yourself right shoulder peek and make the fight a lot easier for yourself than just standing in the bunker. One thing that can also be somewhat helpful if an enemy is pushing you is to like kind of jump out over their head as they push into you and then end up behind them. This can be bad in some situations because you kind of give your bunker up. But if you're confident that you're going to hit a like good shotgun shot while you do that, initiate the fight that way and break the opponent's camera, I think it is something that is worth doing in some situations and can completely win the fight for you. The final thing I'm going to talk about is just going to be that there are zero build realistic maps out there that allow you to fight enemy players, and these often just become bunker fights because one person on either team will spawn with bunkers, or if you're playing solos, I think both start with bunkers. But this can be one of the most ideal situations to kind of practice bunker fights because these maps allow you to get in constant repetition over and over again. There's matchmaking so you can queue into enemy players. So if you do really want to practice some of these things I talked about, like stacking the bunkers, pushing an enemy in a bunker and like throwing it at them, different right shoulder peeks around them in close range fights, these zero build realistic maps are going to be the most beneficial and most helpful thing for you. But that is going to be it for this video. As always, if you guys did find this to be helpful, informative, or interesting, remember to give it a like, subscribe if you'd like to see more, and I'll see you guys in the next one. Thanks for watching.